Hi, and welcome to another episode of 219 Green Connect, where we explore topics about the environment and green news in Northwest Indiana. I'm your host, Kathy Sipple, and with me today I have Tacey Fletcher from INPAWS, that stands for Indiana Native Plants and Wildflowers. So welcome back, Tacey.
Thank you, Kathy. It's my pleasure to be here again.
And I forgot society, didn't I?
That's all right. I'm going to refer to it as INPAWS, and probably forget to mention that we are a society.
Yeah. And let's tell people, right off the bat where they can find out more information about the organization.
Sure. That's at www.inpaws.org, which is pronounced inpaws.org.
Okay, great. And you guys are obviously dedicated toward, beauty and study. What would you say is INPAWS, mission, or what's the main purpose of why you guys come together?
Well, I don't have the mission statement in front of me, but you know what? We all get a little tired of reading
in your own words.
Formatted mission statement. So throw that out the window. We are a bunch of folks that come from many walks of life that want to see the promotion of native plants, trees, shrubs, flowers for the natural spots in Indiana. We don't want to change anyone's minds if they're a gardener and they have a hothouse and they really love orchids of the rainforest and Hawaii. That's fine. We're not going to set out to change anyone's mindset. But if you have a natural area, if you like to walk or frequent a natural area, and by that I mean state parks, county parks, city parks, preserves that are managed by the Nature Conservancy, preserves that are managed by land trusts that are open to the public. If you like walking out there, it's probably because you've already found a fondness for Indiana's native flora. And if you instead are walking out there because you love Indiana's fauna, you love seeing the little chipmunks and deer and birds flittering around, let me tell you, they're drawn to those natural areas because of the native flora that exists there. They find their food source there. They find ways to build their homes, their nests, if they're nest dwellers. If they are little ground-dwelling creatures, then they find the plant structures will help to insulate their burrows. So, that's whatever reason you're drawn to those natural areas, because you're a photographer or you like to hike out there and you feel you get a better source of oxygen, you're also going to, as a sideline, be drawn to the fact that there's a lot of natural things going on out there. Mankind has not fiddled with that area as much as they have town. So that's probably Tacey's version of what our mission is about. Let's promote education of these natural areas. Let's promote enjoyment of it. And let's promote stewardship as well as good camaraderie out there in those beautiful natural areas. But how would we ever come to find them unless someone led us there? So that's why we are a society of folks who get together and help share that information.
Very nicely stated. I like that version very much. And, I will say, just as a personal benefit that I have derived from your vast knowledge, I am one of those shutterbugs that likes to take my smartphone on a hike with me, and I frequent the Indiana Dunes State Park along with my husband and our dog. And I have just gotten tremendous enjoyment out of taking photos of flowers, plants that I had no idea what they were. And I love posting them, and then you and my other very smart friends instruct me, that way, so after the fact. But, it is a bucket list for me that I want to be able to identify these plants a little better. So some of the ways you guys do that, you lead some hikes, isn't that right? And you have some other supporting things that you do to help encourage people hone their skills and get out and enjoy. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, this summer we've just completed a number of fabulous hikes. We never charge for the hikes. We do ask that you think about becoming a member, but guests are welcome. And these hikes take you into some very special, unique, well-cared-for, well-loved places in North Indiana. The INPAWS North chapter has quite an extensive area that we cover, from Lake County to south of Fort Wayne and across that northern swath or northern tier of the northern part of the state. So that includes, of course, St. Joe County, Elkhart County, LaGrange County, and everything in between. These hikes we try and range all over our very extensive area so that folks that are members currently and they kind of feel a little bit isolated way out in, say, Allen County, they won't be isolated. They'll see that there's a nice big group that's coming out there to check out these home spots they've known about for years, but will be visiting for the first time and really looking forward to seeing something in bloom or a plant that we don't get to see very often in our own areas. Though the northwest corner of Indiana is, ecologically speaking, such a biologically diverse area, it's kind of hard for a person like myself who's grown up in LaPorte County right next to the National Lake Shore and the Dunes State Park, which you mentioned earlier, and have lived here all of my life, to get excited when I go to other counties, but it still happens because it's wonderful to see the plant diversity moving through these bogs and fens and lovely little woodlands, and that it extends throughout the entire beautiful region. So about the hikes. This summer I was privileged to lead 2 hikes with INPAWS North. One of them was to the Heron Rookery, which is a Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore property. And then I went and led an INPAWS hike in Marshall County at the Houghton Lake Preserve, which is managed by the Nature Conservancy. Now, the Nature Conservancy property is not open to the public, so you have to get permission. And the steward for that property, who works for the Nature Conservancy, met us out there. He had a couple of his interns as well. And even though he was not able to lead the hike for us, he was about ready to go off and do prescribed burns for the Nature Conservancy. I was able to lead the hike, having been familiar with that property. And we went off in search of some fabulous sedges and cinquefoil shrub, marshland next to a lake. And I went in search particularly of grass of Parnassus, which is an incredible, delicate, creamy, petaled flower that is very specific to certain habitats only. And the interesting thing about these cream petals that are so tiny is that there is a very contrasted green line that runs through each one of these petals in a configuration I have never seen before except in a photograph. And I didn't find it that day, but that's all right. That's what Wildflower guidebooks are for, so that I could pore over them in winter when it's gray outside. You can do the same thing. When you're missing that sunshine, you can just open one of those books and think, oh, I need to go find that again. Or hey, hubby, do you remember when we saw these beside such and such a lake and we had that romantic cabin walk?
There you go.
Yeah, so
can you tell me again, how do you say the name of that flower? How do you spell it?
Oh, grass of Parnassus. It's 3 separate words.
Okay.
Parnassus is the one that would really fool us, and that's Parnassus, I believe.
Okay.
And, so our common names are kind of strange. I really couldn't tell you why it's called the Parnassus, or grass of Parnassus. Okay. But it certainly does, the flower, come up on a grass-like stem. And what I did find that day was a couple of the seed pods. So somehow I missed the blooming season. And that came in handy, though, that I knew where to look for it, and that's okay. We occasionally miss the blooming season. It makes us scratch our heads and go, I wonder what more I can learn about this special flower. But just about 3 weeks ago, Steve Sass, who's the president of our North chapter, and myself and another INPAWS member happened to go on a hike that was led by Derek Nimitz, who is with the Division of Nature Preserves. And this was not an INPAWS-sponsored hike, though I will put in our newsletter any hikes that I know that are open to the public. I'll advertise those. And Derek led us out into a fen in Springville. Anyway, that little community between LaPorte and Michigan City, way out by that private school, La Lumiere. And we were in this fen, and he's showing us all these fabulous things, and some of us are pretty good at plants. And he points down, and he says, can anyone tell me what this is? And I see this little brown capsule on top of a a grassy stem, only about a foot tall off the ground, and he pulled all the plants aside so we could get a good glimpse of it. And I just began to almost jump up and down in this quaking fin, and I said, "Is that grass of Parnassus?" And he says, "Yep, you got it, Fletch." And so it was kind of funny that I did not get to see but one plant of it in Marshall County at the walk that I led. But here it was right next door to my hometown and my home county, and so it was a blast. And these are the sorts of little personal experiences that folks can have if they come out to our in-pause walks. Something that, you know, maybe blasé to you,
nope,
the person right next to you will get excited.
I would get excited about everything, I'm quite sure.
Yeah. Well, as you can tell, when it comes to wildflowers, I am so talkative, it's impossible to shut me up. When people
how did you first get
politics and not the same
How did you
way.
first get really interested in this? I'm just curious. I mean, we've talked about it a couple of times, but I never asked you that question. What was the...
Well, the motivation for becoming a member of InPause or motivation for learning more about flowers? Because
just like what first awakened the interest within you, number one. I'm interested in all of those answers, but yeah, just did you like this ever since you were a child, or is this like an adult?
Sort of, yes. I grew up in a very rural part of LaPorte County, a farming community not far from Bendix Woods County Park, where that lives now, or where that resides. And I was constantly going around to my very busy relatives who were farming and preparing meals and so forth, and picking bouquets of flowers and saying, "What's this? And what's this? And what's this?" And they were just very busy individuals, and they'd say, "Oh, you know," they'd make up a common name if they didn't know it. They'd say, "Very lovely, here's a vase of water, put it in there, now go back outside and play." Mm-hmm. And being in an extremely rural county portion, that was our playground, the outdoors. And unlike a lot of the experiences of environmental educators I run into who say, oh, they had someone who mentored them, it was an aunt, it was a grandparent, it was the Boy Scout leader, it was the church youth group leader, I had no one to mentor me and give me the correct names for anything. So being a very studious individual, when I was spending time in libraries and finished with reports, I decided, well, I need to reward myself. I did this 6th grade report on the rocket Apollo da-da-da, and I'm tired. I'd just pull out a book that interested me, and a lot of times my eyes were drawn automatically to the Wildflower books because I had been walking outdoors and building tree forts and climbing trees and trespassing into this farmer's barn and that hedgerow and so forth. So, but it never really got developed, not through school and not through finding a mentor, even as a young adult, someone who was very knowledgeable. So it's been very late in life that I came across a bunch of folks who were extremely knowledgeable about flowers, wanted to share that information with just anyone who would listen, and it was as if very late in life this grandmother found a great-grandfather or a great-grandmother who finally decided to adopt me as their little plant geek.
Oh,
and
that's great.
Hey, you could have that kind of a relationship too with us.
Well, I think that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Hopefully that answers both questions.
Yeah, well, I knew you were really into it, but I just, that I find that's kind of an interesting question that often leads to, the underlying passion or helps give all of your other experiences some deeper context, But do people bring their kids? Is it a child-friendly type of an event?
Well, we are certainly child-friendly. Some of the venues might not be, or folks might be worried about ticks and so forth. So I always, before having a hike, whether I lead it or one of the other extremely talented folks that we ask to lead our hikes, leads the hike, we have a rundown of what they can physically expect out there. So we can encourage people to bring mosquito protection, sun protection, plenty of water, and boots if the venue where we're going to go walking requires those things. But, kids can kind of get a little bit bored, just like we did when we were playing outside as kids. And if they pick up a stick and they start whacking at some weeds, you can rest assured no one's going to go, oh, put that down, stop whacking. Whereas if you were doing that in the library, you picked up something and you started whacking the photocopier, of course someone's going to be right there to say, stop, you can't do that. Well, we're not that way. As a matter of fact, recently at the Hoosier Prairie hike that we had in Hoosier Prairie, which is in Lake County, and our hike was led by Tom Post, we had 3 young people, brought their mom, and she was a former employee of IDEM, and her youngest daughter had taken a great interest in botany. And so the young lady and the 2 brothers, I would guesstimate, were all under the age of 13, and I had met them at one of the Pinhook Bog tours that I led this summer as a national park ranger. And though I didn't do that as in tandem with the in-pause hikes, because I'd like to do this for my living, leading hikes in beautiful natural areas, I just started talking to them about, your daughter's interested in botany, and the adults said, we're having a tough time finding different things she can do for free. And I said, hey, lady, you're talking to the right person here, let me tell you. And I was able to talk to her about in-pause, and thank goodness I didn't scare her off. And she then came along, like I said, with the 3 youngsters to Hoosier Prairie when we had that hike. And the boys got a little bit bored. They were picking up sticks and playing at swords. But you didn't see one single person say, hey, you could poke your eye out with, well, maybe Mom said that. But we were all totally glad that they stayed on the path and were, quiet and respectful, though they had kind of lost interest. The little girl was definitely interested in paying a great deal of attention, not just to Tom Post, but to the rest of us who would kind of whisper back and forth, look at the colors on this, or why do you suppose this leaf is turning this strange formation, da-da-da. So, I would say we're kid-friendly, but it never should be a circumstance where someone just drops off a kid.
Right.
In this modern day and age. But you know what? It happened when we were kids. Can you recall there were folks that would drop their kids off at the beach and take off? And, well,
it was a different time.
Different world,
I guess I'm just envisioning, if there's a family out there with a young Casey Fletcher in their, among their brood, that this would be kind of a cool family outing that people could get involved in, and it's, very inexpensive or even, free in many cases if you don't have a hike leader, but just is a great way to go out, get some exercise, like you said, get, more oxygen, and I think it slows me down. Like, I just feel my heart rate returning to a healthier, pace, and I do so much in front of the computer, which I do love and have come to rely on, but I love just being out in nature and smelling the smells and seeing the sights, and it's like a spiritual experience for me. I mean, I just do enjoy the discovery and the beauty, really. It's awesome in the truest sense of the word. I mean, I really feel awed many, many, many times when I'm out there.
Well, the interesting thing is, yes, there's a lot of us that totally understand and get that spiritual feeling as well. There's physiological and science-based reasons why you feel very special, lifted, unstressed, however we want to phrase it, as well. I'm not a pure science individual, but first off, you are in an area where the plants are exuding huge amounts of oxygen. And so you have a much cleaner air. Some of us talk about the smells. I can recall when I, in my 40s, was working for Stuart Orr at the Nature Conservancy, and I specifically started talking to him about the smell of fresh cut grass. We had been in an area that, even though it's a preserve, you wouldn't think we'd cut the grass. We we'd load a fire break. And the fire breaks are very good for the nature preserves. But anyway, I said, that smell is just so incredible. I wish I knew what it was. Well, Stuart knew specifically what that scent is that goes on the air when a lot of plants are cut, and it is coumadin. And I said to him, coumadin? I've heard of coumadin. Yeah. And he says that's because it is commercially made in the laboratory and still called coumadin, one of the few things that has its natural name, and it is used to thin blood. And I said, wow, if I can smell a natural product that these grasses have in their structures, and not just grasses, but wildflowers and other things that a lot of folks call weeds, but in-pause folks don't call weeds. That all gets, that coumadin gets released, and that's what I'm smelling? And he goes, So I said, wow, if it's used for a blood thinner commercially, do you suppose it kind of thins the blood a little bit when you're out walking in these? And he says, well, that's a very good question. It probably is the case. I said, I know I feel better. And he goes, I feel better too. So, not to put down what we were discussing, but we weren't in a computer lab where we could immediately drop our, gear that we had with us and do some research on it to find it out. But there is science behind why you feel so good. And we are, as a species,
a reference to, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we did a webinar several months ago with Sustainable Indiana that was, we had Dr. Allie O'Malley from Butler University, and she's a psychologist, and she actually shared the psychology of what happens inside us, when we take the trail, when we're out on a hike. So I will post a link to that as well. And I just want to say, a little station identification. If you're just joining us, you're listening to 219 Green Connect. We do a podcast, not at exactly a regular time, but the podcast is available by subscription on iTunes, or you can always go to our website, 219greenconnect.com, and you could get links to how to connect with us on various social media sites and also see the most recent podcast episodes that we're doing. There will be a summary of this discussion today with Tacey and about INPAWS. We'll include some links to INPAWS and other resources that we talk about during the show. So thanks again, Tacey Fletcher, for being my guest today and sharing your passion for native plants and wildflowers. So through the winter, what exciting things can people do to connect with you as the weather cools and as you said, kind of hone their skills? What are some good ways that people can connect to nature?
You can still hang out with INPAWS folks because all winter long we will have monthly talks since we can't have monthly walks. In this northern climate that we live in, the Zone 5 gardening, there's just nothing that you can do to enjoy out in your yard, green garden-wise. Everyone's getting their garden shack all filled up and the last of their yard taken care of. But you certainly don't have to put aside your love of the outdoors. I'm drawn to INPAWS in winter, these great folks who are all about native plants, because I do suffer, as a lot of LaPorte County folks do, from seasonal affective disorder, which has the acronym of SAD. And some of the things that you can do in a therapeutic way or self-therapeutic way to handle the depressing effects of seasonal affective disorder is to get as much natural light as you can, hang out with good friends who are positive, keep your thoughts on positive things that are always going to be encouraging. And so that's why for years, ever since even before I discovered that I had SAD, I would look at wildflower books in winter. And I would look at pictures of, the sun on the water at some warm beach in Hawaii or Florida. I would listen when people were telling me about their wonderful trips to Florida or Texas, and I'd ask, well, what was the weather like, and how much sun did you see? And I can tell you're tan. Tell me about this, that, and the other. And so I was vicariously,
the full sensory experience.
I was vicariously enjoying what they had enjoyed. And this actually also helps promote positiveness, chemically speaking, in your brain and in your physiology. And so I'd already been self-therapy involved with keeping positive, hanging out with good friends, thinking and talking about the outdoors and sunlight and so forth before I really discovered, hey, this is exactly what a person who gets a little bit winter blues needs to do to make sure that they're going to be safe and happy all winter long. So these walks get replaced by talks in the fall and winter. And so in January, third Sunday of the month, we're going to have a talk. I believe that we will have Dave Hanilla from Chesterton, and if it's not in January, it'll be in February. I'm not on the committee that's setting up the talks, but I did recently set up we'll be with Dr. Michael Huft from, I think he's Glenview, Chicago area, and he is an INPAWS member. He is a distinguished person who is classically botanically trained, and it's always a pleasure when he and his wife can travel all the way from Chicago to come to some of our walks and some of our winter talks. He's come all the way out in winter. I can recall one in South Bend that he came to where Marcy Daly was our speaker. Anyway, he'll be our speaker in March. He may talk about Indiana plants and some of the cousins that he's found elsewhere in his travels. And he will probably talk a little bit about a book that he's developing where he's photographed flowers specifically at Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore and how that's progressing. And just as a caveat, this pretty good friend of mine, we've only known each other for about 3 years now, he was just thrilled that when he traveled to Ann Arbor, Michigan, for the Michigan Botanical Society's meeting, that they pronounced him as the editor for their distinguished paper, their academic paper. So that's exciting because I'm an editor of my little tiny newsletter, and now he's going to be the editor for a very distinguished academic journal for the Michigan Botanical Society. So, yes, and I want to say congratulations to him.
That's great. And by the way, I mean, you're kind of saying your tiny newsletter, but it's a really excellent newsletter. You do a great job with that, and that's a member benefit that people will receive if they join InPause. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, if you join InPause, particularly with our North chapter, then you get the newsletter, and I occasionally send out teaser newsletters to other individuals that I know love nature, just to try and let them know how spectacular we are. I have had a few other InPause members throughout the rest of the state say, boy, I sure would like to get your newsletter in my inbox. I've seen it on the website. Can you add me to your list? And, of course, I'm going to do that because there's no cost to me, and they are an InPause member already. Our state InPause website webmaster, Wendy, has been really nice and has asked and promoted my newsletter on the website. If there's something really important that she doesn't want it to wait a year or so, the dated information would no longer be good. And we've had folks read it and realize that we're a happening chapter and that they want to come on up and visit some of these great ecological sites that we're visiting. But
we really do have some special places up here that are quite unique. So
we do.
Well, that's great. Wonderful. And so tell me about I know you mentioned you have some events, and sometimes podcast listeners may be listening after the fact, but we would like to at least give people a taste of what kinds of things you guys do, and if, the date is still in the future. Obviously, this might be something people would like to attend. So you have a big conference coming up?
Yeah, we have our InPause yearly conference, and that will be in November. And people who visit the inpause.org website will be able to instantly, right on the front page, see the promotion of this. This year's conference has the theme Conservation, Saving Indiana's Native Plants and Wild Places. And we have we have 6 key speakers. The keynote speaker is going to be Peter H. Raven, and his talk is called Conserving Biodiversity in a Rapidly Changing World. And he's a leading botanist and advocate of conservation. I'm the leading advocate for conversation, let me tell you. But he's the leading advocate for conservation and biodiversity. And let's see. I want to also drop down and mention Lee Casbier, who is the top person with the DNR. In fact, when I was walking with Derek Nimitz recently, he mentioned Lee Casbier by name and wondered, told us what Lee Casbier was up to. But he's with the IDNR's Division of Nature Preserves, and he was heavily involved with early inventory efforts to locate high-quality natural areas throughout the state. And the state of Indiana, this particular division, has been working really hard for 45 years of land protection. Lee has developed a special interest in some of Indiana's rarer natural communities, such as bogs, fens, oak savannas, which we have lots of oak savannas up here in our little niche of the corner of the state, prairies, limestone glades, which I've not seen yet, and barrens, which I've unfortunately had to work through. Barrens are not
very
fun.
Exciting. And I hate to interrupt you in mid-thought, but we are inside of a minute left, and I just don't want to have it cut off right in the middle of a sentence. But I want to thank you.
Good point. You have to slow me down.
For joining us once again on 219 Green Connect. You can find out about how to listen to this podcast once again if you'd like to listen to the whole thing in its entirety. at 219greenconnect.com, or you can find us on iTunes. So you have been listening to another episode, and please check out our website, especially the calendar area, for events that we mention here and other events that we haven't had time to mention. Upcoming great green and environmental-oriented events in Northwest Indiana. Thanks so much, Stacey. I hope you'll come back and tell us some more updates soon.
Absolutely.
Take care.
My pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you, Kathy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.